Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the On the Diamond and Into the Deep podcast. As always, my name is Mahal, and welcome to episode 95 of the show. And happy offseason. Happy Jerry Dipoto season. We have made it. Los Angeles Dodgers won Game 7 of the World Series to win back-to-back World Series. If you want to hear my full breakdown, that will be out on Thursday. On my new podcast, the Double Header podcast, I'm talking more about soccer there, but it is a baseball and soccer podcast. So if you want to hear my breakdowns more on MLB as a whole, and also you want to hear me talk some soccer, that will be over there. Again, that's the Double Header podcast. That's at Double Header Pod on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, and Double Header Podcast on YouTube and Spotify. But this is the On the Diamond Into the Deep podcast. As always, Mahal. Episode 95 here, we are going to do our first off-season plan of the season to celebrate the welcoming of the off-season. A couple short notes. The Mariners have, of course, accepted Andres Muñoz's option for this year. It's a $7 million option, so he will be back with the Seattle Mariners as expected in 2026. Mitch Garver's option has been declined for $12 million. It was a mutual option. The Mariners declined their end of it, so he will be a free agent. The one we were waiting on is a $6 million option for Jorge Polanco. That is a player option, I believe, or a mutual option, but it is up to Polanco either way. I'm sure the Mariners would love him back at $6 million. It will be up to him, though, on whether he would like to test free agency and see if he can get more, which he probably would be able to get more than $6 million outside of Seattle. And if he declines that option as expected, it'll be interesting to see if the Mariners make a run to try and re-sign him. It would make sense to. I don't have them re-signing him in this plan. I do have him declining in this plan. But, again, we'll see what happens there. Otherwise, those are the only options that are going to matter. There are definitely some non-tender options. We see GM meetings, I believe, starting, if not this weekend, the beginning of next week. So you'll see trades start to formulate, stuff like that. You'll start to hear rumors for the first time probably next week. Free agency starts to open. I believe it opens this weekend, one of these days. I don't know exactly what day. Off the top of my head, it might be Thursday. But we'll see. Obviously, the biggest free agent for the Mariners is Josh Naylor. Other free agents include now Mitch Garver, but Jorge Polanco probably, and Eugenio Suarez is the other big one. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not very interested in re-signing Eugenio Suarez. Maybe you give him a one-year deal and it's a reasonable price tag, but I don't think that the price tag he's going to want after the year he just put up would make any sense for this Mariners team. Unfortunately, I do love the guy, of course, but I don't think he makes much, if any, sense to resign and bring back to this team. I think there are bigger issues, and I think there's a lot of risk if you do sign him, especially with the budget you have. I think he's costing like $15 million at least, and I don't think you would shell out $15 million to a guy that you don't think is going to produce, because this team, unfortunately, it always has to be talked about. They're short on money, so they have to be careful with some of the money they spend. And that's why you might see a Randy Arozarena or a Luis Castillo get traded to clear up some cash and maybe give them some more options of what they want to do this offseason. That said, they do have actually quite a bit of space. Once you get all the contracts you expect to be off the books, they should have roughly $30 million to spend over the course of the offseason. So it will be interesting to see what they intend to do. To clear up a little bit more space, let's just get into this off-season plan. To clear up a little more space, I have them non-tendering Trent Thornton and non-tendering Taylor Saucedo. I do think both these things are possible, if not likely. Thornton would be clearing $3 million. Saucedo would be clearing $1.25 million. So in total, you'd be clearing $4.25 million, which for this team is quite a bit. That's the difference between potentially signing Naylor or not. That's the difference between a $18 million deal and a $22 million deal. So, I think that they are going to non-tender a couple relievers. I don't think either of those guys are specifically super valuable to this team, especially Thornton coming off an Achilles, and Saucedo hasn't been super good for the past couple years. I also think both can gain stuff from being in new places, so I expect both those guys to be non-tendered, especially Thornton. I think this one's pretty easy. I actually think both of these are pretty easy, but I think for me at least, Thornton at $3 million is just not worth it for this team. They don't have the budget to make that really work. That guy would be your 10th highest paid player, which Trent Thornton cannot be your 10th highest paid player, like realistically. So I do think he'll be gone. Same thing with Taylor Saucedo. He wouldn't be quite that high on your payroll. He'd be 15th actually. So again, it just doesn't make sense really to keep the guy. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Jackson Kowar, Gregory Santos. Those are a couple other guys that are non-tender candidates in my opinion. I think between those two and Thornton and Sauce, I think those are the only four guys that would make any sense to non-tender. Unless they want an non-tender Rayleigh, which would be a shock. He is set to make roughly $1.75 million this year. That's what Spotrac projects. By the way, all my projections are via Spotrac for arbitration guys. So that's Randy, that's Gilbert, that's Kirby, that's Bryce, Spire, Rayleigh, Brash, Santos, Kowar, and then obviously Thornton and Saucedo. So again, sometimes just those slight clearances in payroll can open up the door to talking a little bit bigger contracts for guys. That could be the difference between 4 years for 80 for Josh Naylor and 4 years for 90 for Josh Naylor, which is what he's been projected to get from multiple sources. So we will see what happens there. Moving into additions for this offseason plan. The first is going to be Josh Naylor. I talked about it last week, but this is the move that the Mariners truly kind of have to make. Now, does it have to necessarily be Josh Naylor? No. They need to add a first baseman, though, whether that is via trade or via free agency, and Josh Naylor, in my opinion, is the easiest route to doing so. I think this is a guy that will want to stay here after the year that he just had and after joining the team on this playoff run. I think that this is the type of guy that they should go out and shell out the biggest free agent contract that they have given out. I think that he is worth 4 years and $90 million, like he's been projected. That's $22.5 million a year. I think he's well worth that too. I think it's going to cost that much. Maybe not necessarily, but I think that playing in T-Mobile Park, playing in Seattle, it does add some money onto that contract. So I do think that he will want a little bit more from Seattle to stay here. It's totally possible he wants to go play with his brother Bo back in Cleveland, but they did trade him. It's also possible he wants to be more on the East Coast, closer to home. But you never know. He just had a child, so I think he's going to seek a longer-term contract where he can settle the family and stuff like that, start to raise his family, because I think after having his kid, obviously during the playoffs. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. After just having his child during the playoffs, he's going to want a place where he can settle down for a few years, and I think the Mariners giving him 4. I would even maybe give him 5 years is a place where you could do that, and maybe instead of 4 years 90, it's 5 years and $100 million. And you're giving that guy $20 million a year, but you're adding on an extra year, and that could make sense for this Mariners team. They do need a first baseman in the future. If you give him a 5-year deal, that's signed through 26, 27, 28, 29, and 2030. So he fits that window pretty perfectly, because I think your window, while already open, obviously, it only will grow exponentially more open the closer we get towards 2028, because I think that'll probably be the peak year, 2027, 2028. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But I think Naylor is the guy that you want to get, and I think that he is a better fit than most first baseman, because not only have we seen him be able to succeed in a Mariners uniform, and he knows the clubhouse, and he succeeded at T-Mobile Park, but the type of hitter he is also. He's not a guy that's going to strike out a lot. He's going to get on base. He has better bat to ball. I also think that some of the non-statistical things, he is a good leader. He teaches the young guys a lot. He's a really smart guy. He has good ball knowledge. He knows how to steal bases even without being fast. He's the type of guy you want in your clubhouse, especially around a younger clubhouse that needs to learn stuff, whether that's how do you get to where you want to go in the postseason, in the season, or how do you get the most success out of yourself and the player you are. And I think Josh Naylor can do that. And I think that's why, for me, he of the first basemen that are free agents, we'll talk about trades outside of that, but out of the free agent first baseman, he makes the most sense. There is Kazuma Okamoto out of Japan, who is a little bit similar of a player, but he has not played in Major League Baseball. So I think Josh Naylor is going to be the priority for Mariners. There have been multiple reports of that, and that's expected. And hopefully the Mariners can get that done pretty early so that they can move on to other stuff. And on that, moving on to my next move is I'm going to sign Devin Williams, the reliever, to a 1-year deal worth $10 million with a mutual option for another year at $15 million. Now, you're going to say, Devin Williams, he was good 2 years ago. He's elite 2 years ago. And this last year with the Yankees, he sucked. And there's no way to get around that. Now, that said, he didn't actually have bad peripheral numbers. The problem was that he got barreled up a little bit more, but hard hit was still roughly the same. His extension was still good. He struck out a great number of hitters, 34.7% strikeout rate, 37.7% whiff rate, and his chase rate actually went up. So in some ways, he was actually better. His expected batting average was only 158 against. His xERA was only 304. He underperformed compared to what he should do. And part of that's because he's playing in the bandbox that Yankee Stadium is, and he's playing with some of that pit pressure that comes with playing for the New York Yankees. You start to struggle right at first, and then all of a sudden, that pressure gets to you, and it's tough to come back from that. But he was still a good pitcher. And I think coming to Seattle, it allow him to relieve some of that pressure. It's more like Milwaukee in that sense. And he doesn't have to be the guy in the back of that bullpen. He's not going to necessarily be your closer. That's Andres Munoz's job. This is a guy that is going to pitch the 8th inning for you. It would allow Matt Brash to go back to that fireman type of role, or in the 8th inning if Devin Williams doesn't work out the same way. And there's no such thing. People in baseball say there's no such thing as a bad 1-year deal. And if you can go get this guy for $10-ish million, and you add some incentives to get that up a little bit higher, I think it makes a ton of sense. We saw this guy in the All-Star game a couple of years ago rocking Seattle Supersonics cleats. To me, that's a guy that I could see pitching in Seattle. And where else is it better to make yourself more valuable, blah, 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 than an elite pitcher's ballpark and an elite pitching development team in T-Mobile Park and the Seattle Mariners? I think the fit makes a ton of sense. We know his changeup is really, really good. It's an elite changeup. He needs a little bit more value out of that fastball. His fastball velo was down a tiny bit. But I think that this guy can be an elite reliever again. And I think the Seattle Mariners know how to get the best out of relievers. And this is just another type of guy. It's not necessarily a full reclamation project, but in some ways it was. It would be. This is a guy that strikes a lot of guys out. Guy that will cover innings for you. This is a guy that can be a presence in the back of your bullpen. I really do think he's bound to have a bounce back year as long as he's not in a high stress scenario like the New York Yankees. Do I think that means Seattle necessarily? No. But I think he is a great fit for the team, for the ballpark, all that. So I'm going to sign him to 1 year, $10 million. That's going to already cover a pretty good chunk of what you have open, right? So then we have a little bit more open. I was like, we're sitting at about $65-66 million, which is roughly where the Mariners might end up. I actually think it might have been a little bit below that. Let me do some calculations. Hold on. So it's sitting at about $64 million, actually. So sitting about $164 million payroll going into next year. So you have a little bit of room to play with. And I was like, well, maybe ownership would be willing to pucker up a little bit more money. Exactly. To be exact, it's about $8 million. Not even. Maybe they're willing to open up the checkbook a little bit to get 2 more bats via trade. So it is really tough to create a package And this package might have to be more than what I actually put in here. But the players you are acquiring are my favorite target, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, Brendan Donovan, and you have him for 2 years, and his St. Louis teammate, Alec Burleson, who has 3 years of control. In exchange, actually, looking back at this, it probably would cost a little bit more than this. You might have to throw in, I don't know if it'd have to be a Felding. It might have to be like a Felding type of guy to get this fully done. But Dominic Canzone, Logan Evans, Michael Arroyo, Type P, yeah, you'd have to throw in a little bit more than that. But that is a top 10 prospect in your system and a top 100 prospect in all of baseball. A little bit of a lottery pick with Ty Pete. That would probably be a top 10 prospect in St. Louis's system, I can pretty much assume. Logan Evans, who has shown that he can be a solid starter at the major league level. And Dominic Canzone, who's had a bit of a breakout year last year. But if you add Burleson and Donovan, he becomes pretty redundant because those are both left-handed hitters that they both actually can play in the outfield. So in terms of package, that's where I'm going with it. If you want to talk about the two guys you're acquiring, these are two guys that for me fit the norm of wanting to make more contact and put the ball in play. To start, let's start with Brendan Donovan. Now, for multiple years now, Brendan Donovan has been my favorite target for the Mariners. Part of that's because he is a guy that just hits the ball and he can play all over the diamond. He's a guy who can play multiple positions. He can play second base, third base. He can play left field, right field. Even can play a little bit of shortstop. So this guy makes a ton of sense. He doesn't strike out a lot. Last year he was in the 92nd percentile of strikeout rate and the 95th of whiff percentage. This guy that is going to put the ball in play. He's going to hit line drives. And he's going to hit close to 300 for you. Now, the issue with Brendan Donovan is his splits. He's a lot better against against right-handed pitching, than he is right-handed pitching. Or he's a lot better against right-handed pitching than he is left-handed pitching. So that is part of the issue with him. And in the end, I think it's why he would actually cost a little bit less than you might expect. All that said, he just had probably the best year of his career, especially at the plate. So he's going to come at a hefty cost, and there will be a lot of teams lined up to try and get him. And he's also on the cheap, which is why he makes a lot of sense for the Mariners. He will be making, according to Spotrac, roughly $5.75 million this year. But again, like I said, this is a guy that makes a ton of sense for the Mariners, and part of this will rely on the St. Louis Cardinals finally doing what I think they need to do and sort of blowing it up. But this is a guy that was a 3-win player last year, had 120 WRC plus basically. He hit 287 with a 353 on base and a 422 slug. He had 10 home runs. This is a guy that hits quite a few doubles. He's not going to have a ton of power, but that power can actually go up at T-Mobile Park where left-handed hitters can have a little bit of pull power, and that's where his power does come. But like I said, the issue with him, the scariness with him, is those splits. If you want to talk WRC plus for it, against left-handed pitching, just a 75 WRC plus. Against right-handed pitching, though, a 140 WRC plus. This is the type of guy that can lead off for you against right-handed pitching and then hit farther down the order against left-handed pitching. Now, you might not like the sound of that, but this guy improves the team pretty significantly. And if I'm looking at it, he can play second base, he can play third base for you, he can DH for you, he can play a little bit of left field, a little bit of right field, allow you to DH Randy Arozarena maybe a little bit more so that you don't have his, I don't want to say issues, but he's not the greatest left fielder, as we all know. So I think having a little bit more athletic of a guy, a little bit better of a defender out there might pay dividends for you. This next guy also can do that. The other guy you acquire in this trade, Alec Burleson. Alec Burleson is pretty similar to Brendan Donovan, actually, in a lot of ways. If you want to look at his Savant pages, this is, again, a guy that's not going to strike out a lot, a guy that's not going to whiff a lot. He's going to walk just below league average. He has solid arm strength. He's going to square the ball up, hit line drives, and he's going to hit not quite 300. He has a little bit more power than Brendan Donovan. He's about 20 home run power, again, from the left side. And this is a guy that can play first base for you. So this is a guy that, to me, would be your right fielder and your first baseman, a little bit of DH. And Perry Hill obviously can improve some of that stuff in the infield. Now, the thing with these guys, they're not specifically fast, but you look at Josh Naylor, he's not the fastest guy. He can steal bases. So, to me, I've talked about how I would like to see more athleticism for this Mariners team, and yes, that's a thing. But I want to see guys that can put the ball in play. And watching the Blue Jays do what they did in this postseason, now they didn't end up doing what they wanted to in the final, in the World Series, obviously. But the length of their lineup and the just ability to always have guys that are going to put the ball in play and challenge the defense and all this stuff is exciting. And you have guys that the Blue Jays don't have in Cal Raleigh, Randy Arozarena, Julio Rodriguez, and hopefully Josh Naylor that can hit the ball out of the ballpark. You have more guys than the Blue Jays do that can do that. So how do you build on top of that? Those are also guys that strike out a lot, specifically Randy, Julio, Cal, right? So how do you build your lineup around those guys with guys that aren't going to strike out as much, that are going to put the ball more in play, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And to me, a guy like Alec Burleson, a guy like Brendan Donovan, obviously Josh Naylor, are all guys that can do those things. So adding all three of those guys changes the entire look of your lineup, and it allows you to be a team that, instead of having hit or miss guys sort of in the middle and bottom of your lineup, you still have some of those guys, but it allows you to have more guys that are going to be better at putting the ball in play, that aren't going to strike out, that aren't going to be rally killers. They're going to keep the line moving. They're going to challenge the defensive team. They're going to move runners ahead when they are at second and third. I mean, think about how many times the Mariners had leadoff doubles in this postseason, and they just couldn't move the runners ahead, and that was the guys in the 5 spot all the way down to like the 9 spot. It was that entire range of your lineup that wasn't able to do so. Adding these 3 guys, to me, adds 3 guys pretty much in that range. I think almost all of them would be in that range. I think Burleson and Donovan, at least, you'd have 2 of those guys in that range. Depends how you want to make your lineup. But it gives you more guys that can do that. And these are guys that are that could get on base if they lead off, that could get on base in front of the Cal Raleighs, the Julio Rodriguez, the Randy Arozarenas, and even the Josh Naylors, assuming he's there. So, again, a lot of this relies on what are the St. Louis Cardinals going to do this offseason. But if the St. Louis Cardinals are smart, they're going to tear it down. They're going to rebuild. They don't have the greatest farm system. They have some guys that are a few years away. Can you supplement those guys? Can you, add into a window that might begin not in 2026, but in 2028? In 2029, when these guys, the Brendan Donovans, the Alec Burlesons, are in their final year or are moving on, right? Now, I think Alec Burleson will be a lot harder to pry away than Brendan Donovan might be, because he does have an extra year of control, and he's more in what Brendan Donovan was last year. But I do think it's possible. And if they go and trade Brendan Donovan, then I think that they also might go out and trade Alec Burleson. And like I said, this is another good player. This guy was about a 2-win player. He was a 124 WRC plus. He had 18 homers last year, hit 290 with a 343 on base, a 460 slug. I mean, again, this is a guy that can play first base, that can play right field, that can play left field. Again, he can DH for you some. So there are so many things that make sense about these 2 guys from the Cardinals for me. Because you look at the Cardinals lineup, and it's not the most complete lineup by any means. But they don't have the Cal Raleighs, the Julio Rodriguez's, the Randy Arozarenas in that lineup. And you get some of those better hitters in the lineup that are true natural hitters, then all of a sudden you're building a truly dangerous lineup that can do things all over the park, that can be different types of lineups around it. And we saw the Mariners sort of try to stray away from strikeouts a few years ago, and it failed, obviously. But you didn't have players of the caliber of Alec Burleson, of Josh Naylor, of Brendan Donovan. These are good, established players. Burleson, he doesn't have the splits issue necessarily that Donovan does. A 98 WRC plus versus left and a 132 against right. Again, to me, how can you improve your team? How can you maybe hit more doubles? And that's hard to do in T-Mobile Park. But how can you hit more doubles? How can you hit more singles? How can you get on base more and strike out less? And how can you keep moving runners ahead? And this doesn't even have to be just, singles. To me, it's, can you ground out to the right side with a guy on second to move the guy to third? And can you hit a sac fly when you need a sac fly? And can you rip a single through one side? We saw Jorge Polanco be able to do it multiple times. But to me, it's these are the type of guys you want. And again, Burleson, like Donovan, his power is going to play up at T-Mobile Park, where right field, again, is the area where the most home runs can be hit in T-Mobile Park. Left-handed power hitters can succeed. The worry, though, with these two is, are they going to hit too many doubles to make it possible? Because the gaps in T-Mobile Park are really difficult to hit it. Burleson, not as much of a double guy. This is a guy that's going to hit singles, and he's going to hit home runs for the most part. Maybe he's going to pull a double down the line, or he's going to slash one the other way down the line, and maybe every once in a while he'll find a gap, but he's not the fastest guy. For the most part, it's going to be singles. So, with those two acquisitions, your payroll will come to $172 million, almost $173. And for Burleson's contract, it'll be about $2 million. He is in his, I believe, first year of arbitration. So, this is a little bit over what you expect budget to be. But if ownership are serious about competing, you should be willing to do that. You should be willing to go from your 168, 169, even 170 limit and open it up a couple $1 million more to be able to go get another guy in Alec Burleson. If you want to know what a lineup might look like, it's difficult to sort of know exactly what it would look like and who would lead off, but I would expect one of Donovan or Burleson to lead off, probably Donovan. I expect, especially against right-handed pitching. And maybe you have a different guy do it against left-handed pitching. Maybe then it's Julio against left-handed pitching. But you have Burleson lead off, and then you go I would probably go Julio, and then Cal, and then probably Naylor, and then Randy, and then I would probably go Burleson after that. And then you have, sorry, I'm just kind of doing this on the fly. And then you'd have, I would guess Robles probably DHs or is playing in the outfield then. Him or Burleson, one of the two. I'd have Donovan at third. So then you'd have Robles, and then I would expect JP and Young to sort of close it out. And Young will probably get some days off, and this gives you the ability to mix things around. Your bench would have Bliss, Ford, Rayleigh Williamson. You'd be paying your lineup about $100 million. Your bench would be about $5 million. Your rotation would stay intact, stay the same at about $45 million a year, and your bullpen, with the addition of Devin Williams, would bring that total to $24-ish million a year. And your back of the bullpen would be Nasty, Munoz, Brash, Devin Williams, Gabe Spire, Edward Bizzardo in the back of that bullpen would be nasty. And maybe you can get another reclamation project and do what you always do with the pile, as we call it, in the pen, and you get another guy that could be dangerous at the back of that bullpen. And that would put Spire or Bizzardo more into the range of where they should truly be as relievers, where it's less of the super high leverage and it's more of a mid to high leverage. It's less the 8th inning, it's more the 6th or 7th inning. And that's more where I think those two guys, especially Bizzardo, belong. And Bizzardo took a huge step, but I don't want you to rely on Bizzardo being that guy a second year, especially after all the innings he threw. I do think he's a little bit injury prone after all the innings he threw. So in conclusion, you're acquiring Josh Naylor, Devin Williams, Brendan Donovan, and Alec Burleson. You are going to lose some prospects. In terms of major league guys, you'd lose, obviously, Garver, Polanco, Thornton, Taylor Saucedo, Dominic Canzone. If you want to throw Logan Evans in there, you can also throw Logan Evans in there in that trade. But I think this would significantly improve the team. It adds 3 really good bats that fit, for me, where I think the lineup needs to be improved for the most part, and adds you a back end to the bullpen arm that would be truly fantastic. How realistic is this getting done? I don't know. I don't think that trade necessarily gets done. I do think, like I said, you'd have to add more into that. You'd probably have to add one of those prospects you don't really want to get rid of. For me, it'd probably be Felnine Celestine, and I would be totally okay with that. And it would maybe cost a Cole Young even to give up in that trade, which would be scary. But I do think Cole Young, it's like, can Cole Young be Brendan Donovan, and at where your team is at right now, you probably want the sure thing. And if it is Cole Young, I'd expect Michael Arroyo to stay with the Mariners organization. And then the other thing, I've said it multiple times, but that would rely on the Cardinals being open and willing to trade guys. which who knows if they're going to be. Cardinals always be doing dumb stuff. But if I'm the Cardinals, I would be open to trading guys. I don't think your window's open. You have a tough division with the Brewers and the Cubs in it. And I don't think your window's open for another 2-3 years at least. And the longer you keep these guys, the more you're pushing it down the road, in my opinion. So I think you need to stock up on prospects to try and create that window sooner, sort of like what the Mariners did in 2018, where they tore it down. They weren't good enough. They tore it down. They got some prospects back by trading guys, and then they were able to do a quicker rebuild. I think that's sort of the route the Cardinals should and could take here. And I think it could start with Brendan Donovan and Alec Burleson both getting traded. Anyways, that is all from me here at episode 95 of the On the Diamond Into the Deep podcast. As always, I am Mahal. Follow me at Diamond and Deep on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, all of that jazz. Leave a like, subscribe, follow if you've made it this far. You must be enjoying it. Leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. I will be back a week from today. We'll hopefully have some news to talk about, but if not, we will talk about some potential targets. I will probably do trade targets, either that or we will have a second offseason plan to discuss, one that is maybe a little bit more realistic with less acquisitions. But for now, thank you. And as always, go M's, y'all, and peace.